Hey guys, it's Chris. Today's Sunday, July 5th, 2026. I want to talk about, I'm going to be talking about a touchy subject. So I'm going to be talking somewhat about what happened to me when I was sexually abused when I was a kid, and how that turned me into who I am, and why I read the things I read because of that, or why my tastes go to where they do. It isn't going to be graphic. There isn't going to be any, nothing too uncomfortable. I'm not going to go into real detail about it, but if that kind of thing is going to bother you, then this video isn't going to be for you. Okay, so I just want to give you that warning, because just to go in and start watching this and to be knocked in the head with that isn't fair. So if talking about those kinds of sensitive subjects bothers you, you can give this one a pass. Okay? Okay. So the video is called The Dreadful Whatevers. And in order to get to what I'm calling the dreadful whatevers, I've got to start from when I was a kid, when I was about 10 years old, and I had been sexually abused by my mom's boyfriend. Something that you need to know about when that happens is that everything about who you are is wiped away. Your personality is wiped away. Who I was died. That boy I was died. He went away. It felt like he died to me. He died, and then I took his place, and I had no idea what was happening. I didn't know how to live. I didn't know how to feel. Everything was all bottled up. Everything was confused. And in my imagination, he went away and he lived another life. And he was living a good life. He was doing all of the things I wish I could do. He was who I wish I could be. And my whole life I had, I wasn't really searching for him, but I wanted to know where he was, and I wanted him to come back to me. And, on top of all of that, I figured out that I'm gay, and I had to deal with that. And like I said, I had to deal with who I was in the world without him, because I had been completely abandoned by everything and everybody. So my whole life was, like I said, not searching for him, but missing him, aching this missing part. It was this, my arm was gone, or, this whole side of my body was missing, and I felt incomplete, and I didn't know how to be a person. So that, the loss of myself and the loss of my personality, I became a big part of who I was. I mean, that happened when I was about 10 years old, and I'm 51 now, and I became an alcoholic. I took my first drink when I was 16, and I got sober at 33. So I've been sober for 18 years now, and everything just got twisted up because of that. And that influenced how I saw the world. I mean, it completely changed how I saw the world. And it influenced the kind of stuff I like to read. And I've talked before about Houses Without Doors by Peter Straub, and how that book was a safe haven for me, not because of what happens in it, but because I could understand that I wasn't alone. The stories in that book are really horrible. But there are also stories about grief and trauma, and those seem to be the two main factors of my life. And Houses Without Doors just made me feel comfortable knowing that someone else had gone through something similar. And so I guess this is going to deal a lot also with my dreams, because my dreams they're like films. It's like going to the movies when I fall asleep, and I don't always remember them. I used to remember them all the time. I kept a dream diary at the side of my bed, and I would write all of this stuff down. I'll give you an example. There was one that I was just looking at a desk, and there was a poem that someone had written on a piece of paper, and there was a photograph that was paper clipped to the paper. And the photograph was of a boy with wings. He was on a bicycle and he was crashing through a window, and he was coming in through the window, and they had taken the picture just as he was breaking through. And so the drapes were all blown in, and there were chunks of wood flying, and there were shards of glass flying. And there he was in the middle of all of that on this bicycle. And he was landing in an attic. So he was coming in through an attic window. And the name of that poem was Because He Failed to Unfurl His Wings. And I don't know what the poem was. I wish I knew. I wish I could have woken up and written that down. But I don't think I knew what it was then. I never knew what it was. I just woke up and I thought, wow, what was that about? But that was the whole dream. It was just looking at that picture and seeing the title of that poem, Because He Failed to Unfurl His Wings. So that's the kind of thing that happens in my brain when I go to sleep. And so after I had been sober a little while, I don't know, maybe this was 2011, 2012, something like that. Maybe I'd been sober 3 or 4 years. I went downstairs and I laid on the couch, and my roommates at the time, their dog Gizmo, he was laying on the floor in front of the couch, next to me. And I laid down and I closed my eyes, and it was like I blinked. I blinked, and there was a black cat sitting on my chest, and it was just staring at me. And they didn't have a cat. We didn't have a cat. And I remember that I looked at it, and I was looking in its eyes, and its eyes were like little wreaths of yellow fire. And I had never felt so threatened. I had never felt such a sense of menace in my whole life. I went through, my childhood with my parents and with my brother, and then with being sexually abused. And there all of that stuff and all of the things I had done to myself. I went through all of that, and I just always felt alone, and I felt isolated, and I felt like the world was against me. But I never, ever, ever felt that kind of threat. And just instantly, I just grabbed it and I started strangling it. And when I started strangling this cat, it was biting me, and I couldn't feel it. And I thought, oh my God, they're making me kill Gizmo. So I sat up. I didn't wake up. It never, ever, ever felt like I was asleep. It didn't feel like I fell asleep. It didn't feel like I woke up. It was just that I had blinked and all of this started happening. And so I sat up and I looked down, and there was Gizmo, and he was laying on his side, and he was sleeping, and I could see that his side was moving slowly up and down. And I thought, okay. And across the room, there was a swinging door that was propped open, and it went into a mudroom. And in that mudroom, you would go down into the basement and to the laundry room. And when I looked across the room there through that open door, there was a giant head of a Chinese dragon. It was just floating there, and it was staring at me. And it started slowly rocking back and forth like this. And then it started going a little faster. And while it was doing that, it went up and it went through the ceiling. And I felt so threatened, and I was so afraid that it gave me courage. I don't know if anything like that has ever happened to you, where you're so afraid, you give up or you go at it. And I was going at it. And I said, fuck this, fuck you. And I got up and I ran upstairs to try to get this thing, whatever it was, to try to stop it or meet it, or I don't know what I was going to do if I had come across it. But I went upstairs and it was gone. It wasn't there. So I thought, holy shit, this is this is wild. I don't know what's happening here, because I had to have fallen asleep, but it did not feel like I fell asleep. So the whole thing was so bizarre. And after that, every day that week, I had the same dream. So the next day, I was I went upstairs into my room to lay down and go to sleep. I laid down and I just blinked, and this time that cat growled. It's how cats make that creepy growling noise, and it was over there on a bookshelf across the room, and all the hair stood up on my neck, and then the cat disappeared. And at the end of my bed was a closet. And out of the closet, up at the top by the ceiling, this black inky cloud just started rolling out. And what it looked like was that someone was dumping out an inkwell on the air. And that this ink was just spilling it was almost like a flat surface, but it just came out, and like this ink, and it was roiling and it was moving around, and it came out of there, and I was laying in bed and I was looking at this thing, and I was absolutely terrified. And it came down like a cloud right over my face, and then out of the center of that cloud, this snout, like a barracuda or something, it had all of these teeth, and this snout came out, and this long mouth opened with all of these teeth, and it roared in my face, and I turned away like this, and then it was all gone, right? And I sat up, and again, I didn't feel like I had been asleep. I didn't feel like I woke up. That happened every night for a week. I would fall asleep, or whatever was going on, in some kind of weird trance or hallucination or something. And that cat would growl, and it would be somewhere in my room, and then that thing would come out of the closet and roar in my face, and it would hover above and roar in my face. And it wasn't until years later when I started to think of those two things as the dreadful whatevers. And they're what the dreadful whatevers are. These, I don't know what. It got to the point where I wouldn't go to sleep, and I felt like I was going crazy. I would not go to sleep anymore. I would just have to drop from exhaustion, and that they would be waiting there for me. And I couldn't go in my room anymore. I had to sleep down on the couch. If it was broad daylight, if I walked into my bedroom, I got that horrible feeling of dread again, and goose flesh would just break out all over my skin, and all of the hair would stand up, and I would have to walk out of my room, and I just could not go in there anymore. Something was happening in there. I don't know what it was. I don't believe in ghosts. I'm not a spirit person. I'm not, all of this was in my head, but it was so real and it was so terrifying that like I said, I would not go to sleep. I would not go in my room. One of the other dogs, her name was Jasmine. She was a Labrador. After all of this happened, she started sleeping outside my bedroom door, and she never used to do that. So there were just all of these weird things going along with this crazy dream. So I thought, okay, this is all in my head. I have to give myself a weapon. Somehow I've got to be able to protect myself or rid myself of these things in this dream or hallucination or whatever it is. So I did what you do when you're a kid. I went into the bathroom and I had a spray bottle and I made myself a potion, and I put soap in there and I put some conditioner and I put, whatever was in there, a little bit of rubbing alcohol or something like that. And that was my magic potion that I would use when I fell asleep and that cat would appear and that thing would come out of my closet. I could use this to get rid of them. And in my mind, what I saw was that I saw myself spraying the cat with this thing, and like this green fire just leaping up off of its fur, right? So I had convinced myself of this, that I had this magic potion and that that's what it was going to do. So I felt a little better, and I had it sitting on the nightstand next to my bed, and I fell asleep or had the hallucination or whatever it was, and the cat appeared, and of course I went to grab it. I couldn't grab it. I knocked it down, and it was on the ground, and it was completely useless to me. And after a week, those dreams went away and they never came back. I could go and sleep in my room again. I felt okay. I wasn't afraid to go to sleep. So I don't know what all of that was about, but it's got that. I'm telling you all of this because that's how my imagination is, right? All of this crazy kind of stuff, things like that. That's where my mind goes. And I think that, well, that's just who I am, but it is also a makeup of all of the things that happened to me, all that trauma and grief that I suffered when I was a kid. It came through in all of these dreams, because my dreams, I'm not a violent person, but my dreams can be really violent. And that influences what I read. So there was all of that, and I'm going to read you a couple. I'm not going to read a lot of stuff. I'm just going to read you little bits and pieces of these weird stories or these kind of unsettling things that I really like, and laying the foundation of why I like them, why I am drawn to this kind of stuff, because of the corner of the room that I'm coming from. Okay, so the first thing, this isn't really in any order. The first thing is it's a book of poems by Richard Siken, and it's called Crush. This is his first book of poetry, and it came out in 2005. And if you're a poetry fan, I highly recommend this. Oh, jeez, this is... and I want to... Scheherazade. That's the name of that. I know I'm not saying that right. How do you... Sure. Hold on a second. I just had to look it up. Come on. Let's see. Where's my... I know, sorry. Let's do it. Sorry, guys. How do I do this? Oh, forget it. Scheherazade? I'm not getting it right. But the 1001 Nights, right? You get the drift. That's what this poem is called. Tell me about the dream where we pulled the bodies out of the lake and dressed them in warm clothes again. How it was late and no one could sleep, and horses were running until they forget they're horses. It's not like a tree where the roots have to end somewhere. It's more like a song on a policeman's radio. How we rolled up the carpet so we could dance, and the days were bright red, and every time we kissed there was another apple to slice into pieces. Look at the light through the window pane. That means it's noon. That means we're inconsolable. Tell me how all this and love too will ruin us. These are bodies possessed by light. Tell me we'll never get used to it. Right? So, the number one, the cover is very evocative, right? So this is my kind of cover, because there's so it's so true and it's so honest that for me it's exciting and it's kind of uncomfortable as well. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but that's how I feel looking at this. I saw this cover and I thought, I'm going to love this book, because this is the kind of stuff that comes out of my head. This is the kind of stuff that happens in my dreams. This is the kind of stuff, the feeling that this evokes is what is constantly churning around inside of me. So this Crush by Richard Siken is amazing. the rest of the poems, I mean, I don't know how well I read that, but this is absolutely terrific stuff. If you want to look at the back, I don't know if you can read that. I don't know. There you go. So there's Richard Seiken and Crush in this amazing cover. This is a French writer, Annie Ernaux. She isn't. This isn't weird. The rest of this stuff is horror, and the Richard Seiken is kind of horror-ish stuff, but it's. This is Annie Ernaux just being honest about her sexuality. And again, there is an excitement and there's a kind of dread to that for me. And there's a kind of unease about that because of what happened to me when I was a kid. But I am absolutely fascinated by it. And so the use of photography, she writes in here about this love affair that she is having with this man. And when they take their clothes off, they leave them wherever they were, and the next morning they get up and they take photographs of them so that they have that artifact of their passion, of their lust, of their lovemaking. And it really is just a fascinating idea, and it's a fascinating book. And I'll just read you the first 2 paragraphs of this so that you get a feel for what I'm talking about. Often from the start of our relationship, on getting up in the morning, I would gaze in fascination at the dinner table, which had not been cleared, at the chairs out of place, our tangled clothes that had been thrown all over the floor the night before while we were making love. It was a different landscape every time. Having to destroy it by separating and picking up each of our belongings made my heart heavy. I felt as if I were removing the only objective trace of our pleasure. One morning I got up after M had left. When I came downstairs and saw the pieces of clothing and lingerie, the shoes scattered over the tiles of the corridor in the sunlight, I had a sensation of sorrow and beauty. For the first time I thought that this arrangement, born of desire and accident, doomed to disappear, should be photographed. I went to get my camera. When I told M what I had done, he confessed to having felt the same desire. Tacitly, from that time on, as if making love were not enough and we needed to preserve a material representation of the act, we continued to take photos. Some we took immediately after lovemaking, others the next morning. The morning pictures were the most moving. These things cast off by our bodies had spent the whole night in the very place and position in which they'd fallen, the remains of an already distant celebration. To see them again in the light of day was to feel the passage of time. Okay, there's a reason she won the Nobel Prize, right? It's unbelievable. Her writing is in its honesty and in its simplicity. It is so powerful, and it is so. I have goosebumps right now. It's so honest, and it's so bare, and it's so human. And in being those things, it's also kind of embarrassing because we aren't supposed to be exposing ourselves this way in public to other people because it's a vulnerability, right? It can make us a target. It can open us up so people can hurt us. But at the same time, this is the thing that makes us free as individuals, is to be able to talk about ourselves in this way and to be able to express this idea of love and passion and compassion in the most remarkable way. It is just, she is such a brilliant writer. Here's one of the pictures. So that's one of the pictures that they took as an artifact of their passion. And it's just so, it's uncomfortable for me, but it is also completely mind-blowing and wild. And I have to admit that I am envious of her fearlessness in writing about herself and writing about how she loves, and just the fact that she can do it. It's just remarkable, remarkable stuff. She's amazing. If you get a chance, you have to check out Annie or Now. This is a book of short stories by Edogawa Rampo, Japanese Tales of Mystery and Imagination. And this says, Japanese Tales of Mystery and Imagination, the first volume of its kind, translated into English, is written with the quick tempo of the West, but rich with the fantasy of the East. These 9 blood-curdling, chilling tales present a genre of literature largely unknown to readers outside Japan, including the strange story of a quadruple amputee and his perverse wife, the record of a man who creates a mysterious chamber of mirrors and discovers hidden pleasures within, the morbid confession of a maniac who envisions a career of foolproof psychological murders, and the bizarre tale of a chairmaker who buries himself inside an armchair and enjoys the sordid loves of the woman who sits in his handiwork. So that last one is a story called The Human Chair, which is, you need to read it, okay? You should get this book as quick as you can. Japanese Tales of Mystery and Imagination by Edogawa Rampo. And Edogawa Rampo is a pseudonym. His name was Haihari Taro. I'm probably not saying that correctly. But Edogawa Rampo is the way that phonetically you would say Edgar Allan Poe in Japan. So that's where Edogawa Rampo comes from. And I would just want to read you the beginning of this story that's called The Red Chamber. Okay? The 7 grave men, including myself, had gathered as usual to exchange blood-curdling horror stories. We sank into the deep armchairs covered with scarlet velvet in a room which had been dubbed the Red Chamber, and waited eagerly for the narrator of the evening to begin his tale. In the center of the group was a large round table also covered with scarlet velvet, and on it was a carved bronze candelabrum in which 3 large candles burned with flickering flames. On all sides of the room, even over the doors and windows, heavy red silk curtains hung in graceful folds from ceiling to floor. The flames of the candles cast monstrously enlarged shadows of the secret society of 7 on the curtains in hues dark like that of blood. Rising and falling, expanding and contracting, the 7 silhouettes crept among the curves of the crimson drapery like horrible insects. Edogawa Rampo. This is Titro Grotesco by Thomas Ligotti, who also writes really weird stuff. This says Thomas Ligotti is one of the most original and remarkable figures in horror literature since H.P. Lovecraft. In Titro Grotesco, Ligotti follows the literary traditions that began with Edgar Allan Poe, portraying characters that are outside of anything that might be called normal life, depicting strange locales far off the beaten track, and rendering a grim vision of human existence as a perpetual nightmare. Just by entering his unique world where odd little towns and dark sectors are peopled with clowns and hideous puppets, and where tormented individuals and blackly comical eccentricities play out their doom, is to risk your own vision of the world. Okay, he's kind of heady stuff here. I'm going to read you the first paragraph of a story called Gas Station Carnivals. Outside the walls of the Crimson Cabaret was a world of rain and darkness. At intervals, whenever someone entered or exited through the front door of the club, one could actually see the steady rain and was allowed a brief glimpse of the darkness. Inside, it was all amber light, tobacco smoke, and the sound of the raindrops hitting the windows, which were all painted black. On such nights as I sat at one of the tables in that drab little place, I was always filled with an infernal merriment, as if I were waiting out the apocalypse and could not care less about it. I also liked to imagine that I was in the cabin of an old ship during a really vicious storm at sea, or in the club car of a luxury passenger train that was being rocked on its rails by ferocious winds and hammered by a demonic rain. Sometimes, when I was sitting in the Crimson Cabaret on a rainy night, I thought of myself as occupying a waiting room for the abyss, which of course was exactly what I was doing, and between sips from my glass of wine or cup of coffee, I smiled sadly and touched the front pocket of my coat, where I kept my imaginary ticket to oblivion. These are things that absolutely resonate with me, 100%. I don't know if I should be admitting this stuff, but there it is, Welcome aboard, gang. The last one is from an anthology called Poe's Children, the new horror, edited by Peter Straub. And the story in here is by Steve Resnick-Tem and Melanie Tem, and it's called The Man on the Ceiling. And it won, it won the Bram Stoker Award, it won the World Fantasy Award. When it came out, I think there might have been one other award it won. It came out and they knocked it out of the park. And I'll just read you the first paragraph of this as well, okay? Everything we're about to tell you is true. Don't ask me if I mean that literal. Don't ask me if I mean that literally. I know about the literal. The literal has failed miserably to explain the things I've really needed explanations for. The things in your dreams, the things in your head don't know from literal. And yet, that's where most of us live, in our dreams, in our heads. The stories there, those fables and fairy tales, are our lives. Ever since I was a little boy, I wanted to find out the names of the mysterious characters who lived in those stories, the heroes, the demons, and angels. Once I named them, I would be one step closer to understanding them. Once I named them, they would be real. That story is about, they are talking about nightmares as parents, really. And The Man on the Ceiling, he talks a little later on, Melanie Tem does, about sleeping and seeing a man on the ceiling, and how her first husband didn't believe her, but Steve Resnick-Tem did, and that Steve always believed in the man on the ceiling. And it's about how telling stories save your life, and how your imagination saves your life. And that's what happened with me. There were all of those awful things that happened. No matter how much I hated myself, no matter how much I hated being alive, I could always go back to stories. I could always go back. Even when I fell asleep and my dreams were horrible and these nightmares were atrocious, it was still better than real life. You know what? I'm going to tell you one more dream, and then, how long? This is about half an hour. Okay, I'm going to tell you one more dream, okay? Because this one was wild to me. They're all wild, but this is one more example of this kind of thing that I've been talking about. In this dream, a family of four, there's a husband, a wife, a daughter, and a son. They find two dogs, two puppies. I thought they were puppies at first, but I think they were Chihuahuas. But one of them was a Chihuahua, and the other one was a Chihuahua, but it had been mangled. It was burned, and it was just, it was weird looking. And the family took these dogs, they took them home, and they started raising them. And the dog, or the whatever it was, that was mangled, started growing at a rapid pace, and it became this kind of humanoid thing. And in the dream, it became very protective and possessive of the mother. And I remember at one point, the other dog had a screwdriver driven through its hip. And that thing started attacking and trying to kill all of the other members of the family. And as it grew and it became more human-like, but it was still this deformed-looking dog thing that had human characteristics, it wanted it wanted to be a female. It wanted a sex change. So the family started giving it hormone shots, and it grew breasts, and its hair grew long. And throughout the house, these bushes were growing, and they looked like blueberry bushes. I don't know what they were, but they were all over the place. And at the end of the dream, the mother was up in her bedroom, and she was talking to something in this huge ornate mirror. And those bushes with these berries on them were all around her in her bedroom. They had just grown out of everywhere. And the door to the bedroom was kicked open, and there was a man, and he had these lanterns, and it was a thick rope that was holding these two lanterns together, and he was holding it in the middle, and they were filled with fire. They were just in there, it was just churning with fire. And he kicked the door open, and he came in, and he was going around the room, and he's swinging these lanterns, and they're trailing fire behind them, and he's catching all of these bushes just started going up in flames. And then that was the end of the dream. And I don't know what happened to anybody. I don't know who the mom was talking to in the mirror. I don't know who the guy was. I don't know what the bushes were. I don't know what happened with the weird, creepy dog humanoid thing that wanted to be a girl that was trying to kill everybody. I don't know what happened, but that's where my mind is all the time. And that's why I'm drawn to these kinds of things. Even though, as I said, Annie now she's not writing about stuff like that, but what she's writing about gives me some of those feelings. And I don't know I love it. I don't know if I'm supposed to love it. It feels kind of weird telling you this, but writing like that is really exciting. These are the kinds of things that I love to read, because I think as readers, what we're looking for is a writer whose narrative power is so strong that it has an effect on how we see ourselves and how we see the world. If you're reading the right kind of stuff, and what I mean is the right kind of stuff for you that pushes those buttons and helps you connect things, the books you're reading do change the way you see yourself. They do change the way you look at your relationships. They do change the way that you look at and deal with the world. And from a young age, what I was doing, I was doing that. I needed books to help me build a personality, because my personality was gone. It was just wiped out. And so I was reading Harlan Ellison, and I was reading Kurt Vonnegut. And those guys I was reading things in their fiction, especially Kurt Vonnegut. I was reading things in his fiction like Slaughterhouse-Five, and I was saying, oh, I want to be like that, right? So I started modeling myself on those things. I wanted to be a good person. I wanted to be the kind of person that they were talking about. I wanted to be the kind of person Harlan Ellison was talking about in the introductions to his stories and in his essays, right? I wanted to be good, and I wanted to have a use, and I wanted to feel complete as a human being. And reading those guys and reading books in general gave me that, right? It gave me a life. It gave me a way to recognize myself in other people, and to recognize other people in myself, so that I wasn't so isolated. And then I have stuff like this or like Peter Straub, that isn't so much showing me a world that I need to understand. They are showing me the world as I see it and as I feel it. And I talked about that before in another video about houses without doors, but it's the same with those. Any kind of fiction like that, or any poetry like that, or any nonfiction like that, that is in lockstep with how I feel and how I see things and how I interpret the world and my place in it, that's really my comfort food. I want weird, uncomfortable stuff. There's a novel by Thomas Tessier. I mentioned this on Is This Thing On? And that novel, Finishing Touches, is that might be the only book I've ever read where twice I stopped reading and I thought, what's wrong with me? How can I like this book? It really made me doubt myself, and it made me doubt my sanity, because that book is absolutely insane. It's about this guy has this weird sexual relationship with this woman, and it just is completely a nihilist, really. Life doesn't mean anything to him. He is just completely bored by everything. And then he meets this professor and this beautiful woman, and they just start doing these hideous things that I found fascinating. And I thought, oh boy, you really put your foot in it, man. You're fucked up. And I guess I accepted it. I didn't, because I didn't stop reading the book. I don't think I will ever reread it, because it really is the most disturbing thing I've ever read. I highly recommend it, but man, oh man, did it tied me in a million knots. I don't know what more there is to say about this stuff. That I think I laid out the foundation, probably really, for why I read and why I read the stuff I do, or the stuff that I really like, that really gets to me. Because I read science fiction too, and that's completely different. Science fiction is about the wonder and the awe of the idea and what they're showing me, and this stuff is about going inside and getting in the core of myself, and really recognizing that there are kindred souls out there who who have that darkness, and who have that same feeling about life, and about imagination, and about grief and trauma. And that's just where I live, and I'm okay with that. I had to work through all of those things. And you got to be something. So I guess I'll just be me. Thanks for watching. Thank you for subscribing. And I hope you guys have a great week. See you later.